Welcome to our annual Human Rights Summit. If you were looking for Will Ferrell and Anchorman, that was yesterday downstairs, I think. I want to thank everybody for being here bright and early. We have an incredible lineup over these 2 days, but before we launch into it, I'd like to take a few minutes to explain why we're having this summit. And the best way to do that is to tell you a little bit about our organization. At Human Rights First, we believe American leadership is essential in the global struggle for human rights. Our central mission is to foster that leadership. We challenge our country to live up to its ideals, not only to build a more perfect union, but because no force is more powerful than that of example. We urge our government to respect human rights at home and to use its influence to advance them abroad. Now, I recognize that this may seem a bit ambitious to call for the U.S. government to open a new era of global leadership when this fall it couldn't even stay open. But after years of war, there is mounting isolationism among Americans. A Pew Research Center study released just yesterday found that a record 52% of Americans believe that internationally, quote, the United States should mind its own business. But our country must stay engaged internationally because the alternative is dangerous. When the United States retreats from the world, it creates a vacuum that tyrants fill, and it imperils frontline activists who count on us for support. It also imperils Americans because in this interconnected age of transnational corporations and transnational terrorist networks, isolation is an illusion. Now, this is not an argument for the use of force. That should always be a last resort. Despite what you see on Fox News and MSNBC, American leadership is not binary. There are a range of options between dropping bombs and doing nothing, between boots on the ground and heads in the sand. International law and treaties, courts, diplomacy, assistance, and trade provide opportunities for America to stand with those who risk their lives fighting for freedom. But it only works if human rights are seen as central to our national interest, every day and in every decision. When our country's foreign and domestic policies respect human rights, when we welcome persecuted refugees and combat gender-based violence and champion LGBT equality, it is better able to persuade other countries to do the same. The United States sends a powerful message when it lives up to its ideals, and it sends an equally powerful message when it doesn't. When our country divorces itself from the rule of law, as it did on interrogation and detention after 9/11, for example, it gives repressive regimes license to do the same. And when America's voice is muted about abuses committed by allies, it not only abandons the victims of those violations, but it also reinforces the cynical message that respect for human rights is optional. That kind of selectivity, viewing human rights as a menu rather than a mandate, undermines the credibility of the U.S. government and its ability to lead, not just on human rights, but more broadly. 65 years ago this month, U.S. leadership was essential in the adoption of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. Born out of the brutality of World War II and the Holocaust, the Declaration was not some utopian wish list, but a powerful argument that the peace and security of the world depends on universal respect for human rights. Solving the complex and often intractable problems that keep this vision from becoming a reality is a job for pragmatists. It requires tenacity, fortitude, and broad-based, nonpartisan alliances. We know from experience that human rights progress is possible and more durable when diverse partners work together to bring about change. At Human Rights First, we pride ourselves on this inclusive, results-oriented approach. And that brings me to this summit. Our goal is to create the political environment and policy solutions that will ensure consistent respect for human rights over the long haul. There are human rights champions in this town and across our country, and they are not limited to a single profession or party. Do they represent a consensus? I believe they do, or at least the potential for one. But this potential too often gets obscured by partisanship or by a simple failure to listen and build bridges. That's what this summit is about, building bridges to create a strong and durable consensus for human rights. But even if people agree that human rights should be a priority, it doesn't mean they'll always agree on how best to protect them. Building a strong human rights consensus requires effective and politically viable policy. That's also what this summit is about, formulating solutions to pressing human rights problems. So, I want to thank you again for joining us, and now let's get down to business.